Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Comedy on Power Talk, thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And it's been a while, it's been a minute, but it's an honor to bring in a cat who, I've really admired from afar. I've never actually seen him play live, but just the myriad, the sort of omnivore qualities that he has as it relates to music, his interests in certain types of genres of music, and then certain individuals that he begged, borrowed, and stealed from in order to find his own individual sound is very inspiring. And when I mean cats like, Grant Green and, Larry Carlton, and also just a lot of the really heavy soul, jazz, and blues that was at one time just intoxicatingly on fire in this country. And I feel like even though that's dissipated to a degree because of modern technology, lack of a touring circuit, and several other factors, I feel like my guest is one of the torchbearers for new musical vocabulary on the bandstand, especially with younger cats, people that will look up to him, as he is clearly a link in the chain for future generations' understanding of how real music is made. Scott Sharrard, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Jake, thanks for having me, man, and thanks for that intro. I appreciate all that.
It's true, man. I actually just wanted to start by asking you, just because you've worked with, such a large swath, everyone from your elders through, cats that are younger than you, what is the best way to set the table in order to increase musical vocabulary on the bandstand? I would argue that we've kind of haven't really had any extension of the vocabulary consistently for quite some time. I'd say maybe, and again, I'm not, I look at that Weather Report, Return to Forever, Mahavishnu period. After that, I'm not really sure since that time if we've really, and I'm talking about improvisational music, I'm not really sure if there's been an increase in musical vocabulary. And I just wanted you to talk about how you think it's best to be able to create new vocabulary on the bandstand.
Wow, that's a pretty on-the-nose question right away, Jake. You definitely don't disappoint.
Yep. Nope. No, this is we're going to dropping in, baby. Yeah.
You must have some really well-versed listeners in music.
No, actually, the whole point is to educate cats. I don't expect most people to know this stuff.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I'll say before we get into it, I became aware of your stuff through your amazing Instagram posts, which I'm a huge fan of, and I don't spend a lot of time on social media, but when I do, I find myself reposting a lot of your just these like little interviews, clips, and interviews, sort of like little articles and editorial things. And this question you're asking is like right in line with what I've experienced with your social media, which is, kind of tackling the deeper questions of like how do music creators approach the craft, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, look, I'm basically a rock and roll musician. I mean, I have the most extensive education you could hope for in blues, but I'm not a blues man. I'm a white middle class kid from the Midwest. Hubert Sumlin taught me to finger pick when I was 16. Wow. I mean, I studied with Luther Allison. I toured and played with these guys like Stokes, Willie Higgins, Harvey Scales when I was in high school. I played with Mel Ryan, Wes Montgomery's organist. He was one of my teachers at my high school in Milwaukee.
Oh my!
Went to an arts high school. So I mean, I've been bathed in the waters a little bit, but I've been bathed enough to know who I am. And I was always somebody who is as equally into Tom Waits and Little Feat as they were into Muddy Waters and Coltrane and Miles and stuff. And Hendrix, of course, is my all-time favorite. But let me get to your question. I don't want to extrapolate.
Dude, you can go wherever you want. It's fine.
Yeah, but I really want to address it because it's a phenomenally insightful question for musicians in particular. Basically, the way I look at it is there is no expanding the language in what I do. Okay, so playing rock and roll right now go see any band that's in my quote unquote genre, which I think has been pushed into the daytime Grammy show where they do classical and blues.
Yes.
I went. I was nominated in 2018 for my work on Greg Allman's record as a writer and producer.
Right.
And, I can't say I was shocked to see that the category of music I happen to play is called Americana. It's just everything kept getting pushed farther in that direction into Americana and jam, which I don't even think there is a category at the Grammys for whatever that's supposed to be.
Absolutely not. Yeah, totally.
So, that's a daytime cameras off event for the Grammys, and that tells you everything you need to know right there. What else are we nominated alongside? Classical, jazz, and blues. What do we have in common with blues? We are not a living art. So what I do is very similar to what Yo-Yo Ma does with a cello, okay? So every once in a while, you'll see Yo-Yo Ma do a show where he plays, music by a new composer, and I don't know how many less tickets he sells, but I guarantee he's not raising a ton of money than if he had done a Bach cello suites program, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So it's no different with what I do. If you go see any band at a jam or Americana festival, everything from the amps we play and the guitars we play and the clothes we wear and the things we say and sing about are a time capsule to a American heritage art form. And it's no different than when you see a string quartet play Debussy, okay? Or you see a pianist play Chopin or Ravel. Or, you listen to Glenn Gould, right? You listen to Glenn Gould play Bach or Brahms. I mean, music doesn't get any better than that. He didn't write a lick of it.
No, Densmore would agree. John Densmore would be right with you, brother. Go ahead.
Yeah, music doesn't get any better than that.
I dig.
So fuck it. You're not gonna. Glenn Gould didn't write a lick of music in his whole life, and he changed music forever.
Right.
One of the reasons I even open my ears to music, especially these days, is to listen to him play the piano. And he didn't write a fucking thing. He didn't make up a thing. What he did was he found a voice using the compositions. And that's what you're seeing now. When you go hear Chris Stapleton or Derek Trucks or any of these guys, you're hearing a Glenn Gould. You're hearing a Yo-Yo Ma. That's what you're hearing. You're not hearing Jimi Hendrix. If Jimi Hendrix was 25 years old now, he'd be at a startup in tech.
That's right. Yeah. Jeez. I mean, I can't believe it's so beautiful to talk to a cat who's, I mean, like you said, you are, I guess you just articulated that, and I've never, it's totally true. I mean, you look at all the great cats, you look what Coltrane did with My Favorite Things and taking those, quote unquote, American songbook things, but then making it your own, right? I mean, and that's what I'm hearing you say, is that you finding your own voice through what's already been done.
Yeah, and I mean, look, it's interesting. It's an interesting reference, like the Coltrane My Favorite Things, right? Because like My Favorite Things is like this huge, it was a huge film. It was a huge soundtrack. I think it was also a Broadway production, right?
Yep.
So my knowledge of musicals is very limited, but the point is that this was this pop piece that was then turned and extrapolated by these four brilliant Black American men at a very fraught time, yet another fraught time, right, in America.
Absolutely.
It's like the whitest thing ever made gets turned into this incredible statement, spiritual, socio-political statement. Hendrix was doing the same thing. Miles was doing the same thing. Sly Stone was doing the same thing, kind of all within the same 10, 20 years. But here's the thing, and this is the part that I think, I don't know if we take it for granted, but I don't think it's talked about enough, is meanwhile, records, more and more, from the invention of recorded music all the way up to about the mid to late 70s, maybe even into the 80s, even into the dawn of MTV, are the biggest form of entertainment on fucking earth.
100%.
So when Miles Davis needs to make sketches of Spain, what does George Avakian do? He goes, well, shit, I'm sitting on millions of dollars. Why can't I give Miles money for an orchestra? Well, he's going to lose money. Well, who cares? We're making all this fucking money. I can slip a Miles Davis date in here. And that's what they used to do. That's what they used to do for the Allman Brothers and Little Feat and Led Zeppelin. And in you know, kind of getting back to my genre, which I call rock and roll, is like those bands were exploring new vistas in what it meant, you know, kind of started by the Beatles, of course, and then those, you know, and then Zeppelin, and then it came back to America with like these bands that I've been a part of, like Allman Brothers and now Little Feat, where, you know, my two favorite bands in my youth were Allman Brothers and Little Feat, and here I am, you know, a family member of both now, and that's a weird realization, but at the same time, you got to remember, those guys never did numbers. When Duane Allman was walking this earth, he would have made more money doing sessions at Muscle Shoals than he was making playing with his band. You know, same thing for Little Feat. I mean, they fought tooth and nail with Warner Brothers to stay on, and they had great advocates who were real tastemakers like Mo Austin and Ted Templeman, who ferried them through, and thank God for those people. But those people don't exist anymore because there's no cover for them. So without a record to sell, you're not going to make Dark Side of the Moon. Are you kidding me? How are you going to get a session in a studio like that with musicians like that who can fall on their faces over and over again and go, hey, you're not supposed to put a microphone there. Really? Let's try it for a week. You know, I mean, that's not going to happen. And you think people can do that alone at home in their studio? I mean, I love what Billie Eilish and her brother are doing. I think it's really innovative. I don't relate to it, but I admire the shit out of it.
Right.
I have a ton of respect for it. But I'll tell you what, I can't, you know, as a musician, I can't relate to that process. That's not my process. It's the same thing as going, hey, Yo-Yo Ma, why don't you just plug into a Marshall stack? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I want to read you this quote from I've done several interviews with Ernie Watts, and he said, Coltrane was ABC Impulse's shining light for many years because of Bob Thiel. The jazz side of ABC was basically a tax dodge. They'd have Paul Anka or Neil Sedaka, RCA Victor, selling all these records for them, and they'd be making all this money. As a tax shelter, they would start these jazz companies, and they would let people play. That's how these companies got started. The music was great. The musicians were great. You had people like Oliver Nelson, Pharoah Sanders making all this incredible music. And it was allowed to be recorded and allowed to be marketed, and they had a certain amount of sales. They were basically these jazz companies coming off of giant companies like ABC and Capitol and Columbia. They were tax shelters for the incredible money that these companies were making. Now, that's what you're talking about. Why were those, someone like Bob Thiel, you said there's no cover for these people anymore. So the bean counters got involved at a certain point and basically took control. It was all about the bottom line, the efficiency model, don't take any chances, and just put out stuff that's going to pacify the general public. I mean, when you talk about, in your mind, like, so I just want to be very clear, though, going back to my first question, you feel like it is a fruitless endeavor for someone like you or people to, because like when I remember interviewing Gene Perla and him and Liebman's like, there's nowhere else to go except maybe incorporating different instruments that you would not normally see in certain settings, you know, classical instruments and rock settings, things like that. You know, but there's no, do you believe that musically we've already gone as far as we can, or do you just think it's just too hard to market? I think that's the other part of it, is that there's no marketing arm, ABC Impulse, all this stuff. There was records being pressed. You had marketing. Even if you made a Dark Side of the Moon today, you have to market it yourself. So you can riff on that any way you want.
Yeah, I mean, look, when, you know, my parents were old hippies from Ann Arbor and Detroit, Michigan, respectively. And
beautiful.
You know, and my dad's early mentor, he was a professional musician, and his early mentor was Russ Gibb, who ran the Grandy Ballroom in Detroit, which was, you know, Russ was like the Bill Graham of the Midwest. So, you know, Russ was my babysitter when I was like 5, okay, from like when I was 5 till 10.
Whoa.
So, you know, I was raised by musicians in a musical family, musicians in the house all the time. You know, when I was a teenager, my dad had this little in retrospect, chintzy. I thought it was a big deal, like tape studio in the basement. Buddy Miles used to come over and record, and Willie Higgins and all these guys in Milwaukee when Buddy was there. And so I was raised in this shit, and hearing all these stories about, how it was and how it is now and everything else. But the simple dollars and cents of it, man, is like, if you don't have a record to sell, you don't have anything right now. Because basically with the streaming thing, and I know everyone's got their own take on the streaming thing, and a lot of it is like the okay boomer, shut the hell up, But look, it's a simple fact. Like, you're not going to, it's just not going to change. And the other thing is, this is the natural evolution, because I go back to Exhibit A, which is how we started our conversation, which is the guitar is done. The guitar is done. Wow. Jimi Hendrix finished the guitar.
Right.
Done.
Right.
The drums are done. The acoustic drums. The electric bass is done. The piano, the cello, the viola, the violin, they're done. That's, if Jimi Hendrix had said, I'll go back to Exhibit A, because for me, he's, if you ask me pick one, that's who I pick. That's my my guiding light, Jimi Hendrix. And, because for me, not only did he end the electric guitar, because he took everything from Charlie Christian and Lonnie Johnson to Buddy Guy and Otis Rush and Freddie King to Pete Townsend and Clapton and everyone else who was around. He rolled it up in a package and he fucking played the Star Spangled Banner. I mean, and then he burned, and then he fucked it, and then he burned it. So,
right. You're right.
I mean, what else do you do with the electric guitar after Jimi Hendrix? I mean, it's like, it's a performance art piece. I mean, you listen to the records, all the innovations with pedals, feedback, amplifiers, miking, production techniques, songwriting style. He was writing like in the style of Bob Dylan, who's the best American songwriter we've ever had. He could write like that. He could play like Buddy Guy. I mean, he could do everything that came. He could do these, sound pieces live. When you think about Machine Gun, that cut, that changed Miles Davis's life forever. So if you can change Miles Davis's life and you can change Bob Dylan's life, it's pretty sure that you're the motherfucking guy.
No, you're really nailing this, but is it not so like McLaughlin or Sonny Chirac or Pat Martino? I'm talking like mid-'70s Pat. Was there any extension after that, or you just think that Hendrix fucked it and killed it and it was done?
I just don't know how, by the way, if you're going to bring up those guys, George Benson, right?
I'm sorry, I'm leaving out a lot of cats. I realize.
Yeah, but I mean, there is a whole nother subset, but the thing is what they do. Okay, so
it's a subset. It's a subset. That's what it is. It's a subset.
I even have this band I do. We do it about a half dozen times a year here, usually Bar Lunatica or Smalls. It's like when I dip my toes into the jazz world.
Oh, I love it.
And
we want more of that.
We do a Grant Green funk band where we only play his funk arrangements, from his records.
Oh yeah.
And people fucking love the show. I mean, I've had Ronnie Foster, who played organ on a lot of those records, has seen clips of the shows, and he sent me messages about how much he loves it, which is crazy. We've had Stanley Banks has been at the gigs. George Benson's bass player for like 40 years. He's a CTI bass player. He loves the band. Like having those guys endorse it is amazing. But let's be clear, like what Grant was doing never got over, and it's an injustice. But the difference with Hendrix, and the reason that Hendrix ended the electric guitar, is because not only did he do exactly what he was hearing, but it got over, and it made it through that wall, that commercial wall, to the point, much like Stevie Wonder or later on Prince, or, we have a lot of examples of this throughout, well, not a lot, but we have a handful of examples from the 20th century. He's one of the guys, or Dylan for that matter, or the Beatles, where it's just, they broke through the wall, and then when they got through the wall, they fucked the place up, changed everything. You know what I mean?
You nailed it. No, you're right. The other guys did not. And some because of their own vices, but also just because of, it was to thread that needle of getting through the commercial wall or breaking through it it takes a lot. And obviously the vibe that Hendrix, I mean, his music is undeniable, and then also it's that vibe, it's just, with Grant, I mean, the tragedy is that, he'd go to Blue Note and, he'd make some ridiculous, I mean, this is even like, more acoustic kind of soul jazz, but, I mean, he'd get paid in junk, he'd get paid in drugs. He wouldn't get money, I mean, it was just a kind of a mess, I'm not saying Hendrix.
Well, Stanley, when Stanley Banks came to our gig at Bar Lunatico, which is not a big place.
No, not
Brooklyn,
at all.
It's a
dude, you must have blown the roof off that place, dude.
It's an amazing place. I mean, that's the home for that band. That's our spiritual home, and it is packed like a sardine can every time. And packed there is like 70 people.
Yeah.
And Stanley came in there, and he was packed into the bar. And when we came off stage after the first time he heard us after the first set, he bought the entire band a round of drinks. And he cheers us, and he said, man, I'm so proud of you guys doing this, because he said, I used to go see Grant do this all the time, and I thought it was going to be the biggest thing since sliced bread, and there'd be 5 people in the audience.
Right.
He's like,
right.
It makes me so happy that you guys are here doing this for him, and that this place is full of people, because I never saw him get that recognition when he played this kind of music.
Scott Sharrard is already blowing my mind open. I mean, do you? Well, I just want to be very clear about something. You had a profound impact. You changed the life of one of my dear friends, and quite honestly, I mean, it's the only request that I have as we come out of sort of unravel and unatrophy ourselves out of the pandemic. This is the most genius concept of all time. And I wasn't there for it, but this band, we want to see full touring of Northern Aggression. I mean, this band, I'm telling you, man, it was like, dude, I was crying that night. My buddy was like, dude, they're playing the entire Southern Comfort album, or like all the Crusaders stuff from the mid '70s. I'm like, dude, that's where I lie. And I was like, it was Minkoff, Leone, you. I mean, it was the most filthy band. And my buddy took a couple of, jaded videos. But, I mean, can you talk about, like, with Northern Aggression? Like...
the Northern Aggression All-Stars?
Dude, the Northern Aggression All-Stars, I mean, I want to see that, a prolific tour. Like, I mean, Little Feet, come on,
God.
I love it. I mean, that.
Well, I got Tony Leone into Little Feet last year, so we're almost there.
Well, I mean, first of all, I mean, so we're talking Leone, you, Gradney, Tackett, and Bill Payne, or which Little Feet?
Yep. That's right.
I mean, Northern. Can you talk?
And Sam Clayton.
You got Sam's back in the band. Wow.
Well, Sam's always been in the band.
The times I've seen them, though, I just want to ask you about the Northern Aggression All-Stars. I mean, really, seriously, man. Like,
I forgot about that thing.
Dude, I'm telling you, Sharrard, that was like, I was freaking out, because he's like, dude, they're playing like this, like the Scratch album, the Crusade. It was like Wilton felt like that's.
Well, let me give some of the fellas credit. So Craig Dreyer, who plays sax and keyboards in my band, as the fourth piece when we can afford to bring him along, and Ben Stivers, who you saw playing keys that night, they have a band that only plays Crusaders music.
No.
Okay. Yeah, no. It's amazing, and I've played in that band a couple times, and the reason I brought those songs up is because they do a show where it's like 20 songs. It's a great band. It's got like Tony Mason plays drums, Andy Hess plays bass.
God, Wait, are they playing Jazz
Street.
Crusaders and Crusaders, or only the electric, or both?
Oh, mostly the electric.
Oh my
Clark Dayton
God.
plays trombone, and Al Street's the guitar player. So that's that band. And I've sort of subbed for Al, and I guess I've subbed for Al in that band twice, maybe.
What's the name of the group? What is the name of the group? What's the name of the group?
I think they call it Street Life.
Dude, all I'm saying is the clips that my buddy sent me that night are like, I just like, please put me back. I mean, it was like you were on fire, Leone. Mink, I mean, it was filth. It was the filth. It was just like a Crusaders gig, man. It was ridiculous. And I'm just saying,
well,
like,
you should hear that band. That band they have is like, it's phenomenal, and they play at Lunatico all the time, or were, of course.
right. Actually, your gig was at Bar Chord, but or that Northern Ag gig.
Yeah.
I mean, so with a, I just want to go back because you're articulating this very well. How do you keep, aside from, like, okay, so you're part of these sort of the lineages of these, iconic name bands, Allman, Little Feat. How do you, for lack of a better word, how do you get off in those bands? I mean, in terms of, the one thing that's cool about Gradney is that, and Leone for that matter, I mean, you guys will, is it sort of like you'll never play the same song the same way once? It's going to be different every time. How do you stay engaged, even though you know the material like the back of your hand, and then at the same time you don't want to take it to a place where you feel like you're wanking it or selling out? I mean, where's the fine line between getting yourself off and still pleasing the people who are paying the money to come and see the hits that they want to hear?
Well, I can tell you, having my second round being part of the family of a legendary rock and roll band, and then also I got to hang out around and played quite a few times in the studio and on stage with Levon Helm too. Wow. And he gave me some great insights into how his world worked and how his internal process and clock formed his playing and view of music. So it's kind of, the band was like another one of those bands for me when I was a kid. So
sure,
I've had some real serious lessons from my heroes.
Can you talk about a couple specific, like with Levon, what kind of resonated with you?
Well, it's all the same for all of them. It's these bands that we all love, whether we're talking about the Beatles or those bands. It's all about the songs and the singing. That's the whole gig.
Right.
So what does everyone have wrong now? Basically, as far as the songs are concerned, in the jam world, they mean nothing. It's about like who your special guests are,
right?
Or something,
exactly.
or whatever.
Exactly. No, you nailed it. Nailed it. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Or your cover. We're playing American Beauty front to back in the style of.
That's right. I did.
And then the other thing that's going on right now is like the cover thing. Where it's like. It's very interesting how that's going down, where a lot of times you'll hear a new artist doing a song and you'll find out that it's an old song that they've rearranged, right?
Yes.
So I just think, and it's not all the time, but it's just generally kind of like that in the Americana and jam world. So I think the challenge we have is like the fact that the industry kind of encourages things to be built backwards. And this goes back to sort of my Beethoven's Fifth theory, which is what's going to sell the tickets to the subscribers? Beethoven's Fifth, or i.e. Grateful Dead, American Beauty, or one of my shows, Allman Brothers Live at the Fillmore East. I mean, my band increases its guarantees by 75% when we do one of those shows. Just because we play this album front to back in a certain order, we can sell 600 tickets instead of 150. So, I mean, it's like, people are hungry for this classical jazz programming style for rock and roll. It is working. It is getting over. And there's no shame in that game. It's just when the Allman Brothers were doing it, the first question was, how do we make Greg sound great singing this song in any way we can as musicians? And what are the songs? And how do we serve the songs? And now a lot of bands are about hurry up and get to the solo, hurry up and get the special guest on, hurry up and get to the classic rock cover, buy the right hat, you buy the right amp. It's all become, it's not about the song first. It's like the song fifth and on the list. And usually by the time an artist these days figures that out, if they make it over their virtuosity and not their songwriting, all of a sudden overnight they want to be songwriters. And then it's like, oh, well, wait a second. Because, to be a songwriter, there are a bunch of steps in your career and a bunch of floors you have to sleep on that you haven't to really get that together. So it's really a weird time to play rock because it's in a transitional mode. And of course, right now, I mean, look, bro, we just dumped a fucking atom bomb on the whole thing. Okay?
I mean, dude, a total freaking Hiroshima, Nagasaki, dude.
And I'll tell you, the corporate music industry as we knew it is gone. Everyone's gone rogue. Everyone's starting their own company.
Wow.
From the promoters to the managers to the agents. It's completely done. So I am very hopeful about this because I'm starting to experience a lot of animosity finally on the organizational side of this instead of just on the musical side. I'm starting to see business people get angry about the system. And that gives me a lot of hope because that says, okay, well, maybe we're going to figure out a way to monetize music in some progressive way. And look, it may look like Jazz at Lincoln Center. We may see, I mean, the Rock Academy, I don't know if you know Paul Green and his whole Rock Academy, they made that movie with Jack Black about it. But, I mean, that franchise is enormous, and they're teaching kids how to play rock and roll by ear, and they're learning, I teach a summer session. I was supposed to do one this last year for a couple of days at the Rock Academy in Woodstock, New York. These kids are really good. I mean, I worked with them in 2019. They learn by ear. Some of them read music, but they understand the oral tradition of music in America. They understand folk, blues, rock, jazz, how they all fit together. They have repertoire. They have chops. So why not a bigger umbrella for this? Why not an American roots rock music, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, Tedeschi Trucks Orchestra in every major city of 15 or 20 teachers who play together in an ensemble and play Dark Side of the Moon front to back,
Wow, there's so much going through my head. Do you believe that one of the issues is that, truthfully, the baby boomer generation, which is, they have the most money in this society, longevity, they are living older now. I remember the Blood, Sweat, and Tears post David Clayton Thomas had a song, Are You Satisfied? And they talked about basically digging a hole at 64. So they live older, they have the money, and they refuse to exit stage left, and yet they are clamoring for this greatest hits, this codified. Do you feel like, as a Gen Xer at 43, it's like I just feel like, it would be wonderful if the boomers exited stage left or gave some kind of creative control to a younger generation. But this is actually the question, because I'm going to go back and ask you this. We're talking about Hendrix. He did cut through the commercial wall. Grant Green, Benson, and then you go to drummers just in the jazz vernacular, Pete LaRocca, Tony Williams, Mickey Roker, Max Roach. Everybody had their own individual sound. Everybody, you could tell anybody from anybody else. I remember Garibaldi telling me, he's like, if somebody came up to me after a gig and was like, yeah, man, you just sounded just like Sam Lay or Gregorico, he'd want to slit his wrists. Everybody wanted that individual sound. And so that was because of the oral tradition of language and the street scholar mentality. You talked about the blues cats that you learned under in the Midwest. I mean, part of me feels like maybe individual sound would not be accepted and be able to be monetized because everything's being played so safe, or they want to rewind the clock to these greatest hits. Do you really think that blues, rock, and maybe more specifically jazz can really be learned in the academy, or can it only be learned on the street? And if so, is there really enough venues and touring circuits for that to happen? That's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I want you guys to make livings, don't get me wrong. However that happens, it happens. But I'm just looking at the fact that, like, it does sound to me like there's a homogenization of sound today in improvisational music. It's hard for me to determine who's playing. And that wasn't the case back in the time period that we tend to obsess about, late 60s and early 70s. So maybe the question for you is, how did you develop your own individual sound on your apparatus?
Wow, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff going on there in terms of jumping from the 90s when I started to now.
Any way you want to go, you go. Yeah, it's fine.
how everything has changed. You know, I learned with a CD player, and I didn't have any transcriptions. And now, you know, especially in the last year, I've been, you know, with the shutdown, I've been teaching on Zoom like 20 or 30 hours a week. I teach guitar, vocals, songwriting,
Wow.
and it's really gotten my family through this whole thing because my royalties are not enough to support my family.
I'm really
God
happy
knows.
to hear that, man. I mean, you deserve it, man.
And I'm a very, very passionate teacher in American roots music, whichever genre it is. So I love doing it. And I've done it on and off, and I've done it as an adjunct at universities and stuff. So I've been at it a while. So I've got kind of a loose pedagogy and a way that I approach it. In terms of like, you know, like I said, you know, I would go, okay, to the record store, and I read about Grant Green Alive, okay, in a
Yes.
interview with Stevie Ray Vaughan in Guitar World magazine in the early 90s, and I spent 2 years trying to find the album. It wasn't on CD. Obviously, no internet existed. It hadn't been reissued. It wasn't available in Japan, this particular record. So I would go in the bins every weekend and look. There were a couple like Bobby Womack records. There was a Tyrone Davis record.
I love this.
There were all these records.
Yeah.
Phil Johnson, Ann Peebles. I'd hear from musicians, "Oh, you got to get this record." Man.
Right. High
and then I'd try to
record.
find it.
Yeah,
I'd be like,
totally.
yeah, and I'd be like, man, I can't find this shit anywhere. You know, you go to get a certain Al Green record, you can only get greatest hits and maybe 2 other records, right? So,
Absolutely.
So I just lived in these record bins. And let me tell you something. When in Milwaukee in the early 90s,
Oh my God.
mid 90s, when you would find a record, and I had a friend who was 2 years older than me who lived in New Orleans. And when I was 16, you can drink there. I flew down when I was 16, and I started raiding the bins there. And you better believe I came back with half a suitcase full of Allen Toussaint meters. And nobody had this shit in Milwaukee, bro.
That's
Nobody
amazing.
had it.
I mean, you're telling me that.
I would do.
Yeah, go ahead. Continue.
What I would do is cassette tape this shit.
Right.
And everyone would cassette tape it for each other. And we started learning. I had a band called the Chesterfields, and we learned all the meter songs. And we started playing them on gigs, and we'd play these packed clubs in Milwaukee, and everyone thought we wrote this shit. No one had heard any of this music before.
Profound.
They'd never heard
This is
people
profound.
say, Change Reform, Look a Pie Pie. They never heard any of this shit. They thought we wrote it. so that's, can you imagine a world where somebody can't, you know, hold up fucking Kazam and go, oh yeah, I already have this record on Spotify. It's like,
Yeah.
So here's what would happen. Every record that I would find would become this excavation site for all the musicians that I knew. And we would listen to these albums in my car on cassette, in their cars on cassette, endlessly. You'd have 5 albums for 6 months where it would be like all you'd listen to over and over, and you practice over and over and over and over. There's no tab, there's no sheet music. It's you and the text. You know, this shit is like, it's like a biblical level of obsession, you know?
No, but it was all autodidact. It was all, your ears were huge.
How do you recreate the passion as a teenager going to it? By the way, going to a jazz arts program that was one of the top 2 jazz arts programs in the country. We used to compete with Dallas. So, I mean, everyone in my school is an amazing musician. Like everyone in my ensemble is a professional musician right now. So this was the environment. And what do I say to young people? I mean, I have some kids who study with me who are teenagers who could fucking play circles around me when I was a kid.
Right.
But are they ever going to want to write songs? I have no idea. You know, for me, it was like, I had managers and shit offering me deals when I was a teenager to be one of those like little Stevie Ray dudes. And every town had like 2 kids with fedoras and Stratocasters. And I said, I never want to do that. Like, I love Lil George and Tom Waits. Like, I don't want to be a fucking sideshow blues faker, you know?
I
was saying that when I was 15. You know, I had the because I had the older guys around me like, yo, man, you don't want to do that wacky shit. You know, like the real guys were telling me like, and I listened to them. And that's why it's been, my career has been kind of a slow boat to China. It's because, like, I listen to those guys, and it has played against me in terms of the way the commercial landscape has changed, but it's played for me as a creative person.
I love the reference to Arthur Lyman's Slow Boat to China. This is unbelievable. I mean, it's actually nice because you get to really focus on the scenery along the way. I mean, like, for the younger cats, are they, like, how satisfying is it when you're like, when they could play circles around you, but, you know, like, isn't it satisfying when you teach them, not even teach is the wrong word, but when you realize that they are searching for that it feels good? That's what it's about. I mean, like you said, Levon, what those guys were about was serving the song. What was the song about? How would, you know, and you know, to me, like, the riffology, going and seeing somebody playing myriads of notes, I mean, it's not going to do anything for me. I want to let the body dance. I want to see a real loose pocket. I don't mind tempo shifting. I love that. I love people taking chances. I mean, do you have kids? Do you try to get kids to, I don't want to say unplug, but I mean, get back to a point, like when you talk about analog cassettes, those things would get warped over time. You're not even sure sometimes if it was playing at the right speed, but you're listening to it over and over. And ultimately, you're up on the bandstand playing that stuff, and you might hit a clam, and that clam will take you to a whole new musical universe. And people just today seem, younger cats, perfection is at an all-time high, technique and facility as opposed to feel. And I just...
It goes with the whole woke kind of aesthetic where it's like you can be, you know, held accountable for everything you say and do, and your performances have to be perfect, and your politics have to be perfect.
Exactly.
I mean, it leads to, and that's not a political statement I'm making. It's more like, it's just like that plays into your abilities as an improviser, is like, of course we have to be progressive as a people. And of course, you know, this country is so effed up in terms of its history and needs so much fixing. And of course, you know, our most recent management was a goddamn living nightmare that ruined every day of my life for those 4 years.
Everything.
So it's like we have so much reckoning to do, and I'm so happy about changes that have come about lately. And I feel like these conversations are a little bit interconnected in terms of, like you said, like would these records, these rock and roll records we love, how much of them would be written now?
Right.
Like how much of them would be done, and how much of them would be not allowed to come out or canceled for whatever content. And look, maybe it's right, maybe it's wrong. I don't know. I'm an old dog. I'm actually 44, not 43. So it's like, I'm pretty, you know, I'm long in the tooth. So, and I'm the first one to admit that.
Dude, knock on wood. I mean, you've been playing for so long that you got many chapters to write. So, I mean, you just have you've just been a street scholar. But I mean, I feel like I'm 43, but after doing 2,000 interviews with all the cats, I feel my soul is totally young. You know, I don't think, you know. So
I mean, that's an important mental space to be in too. But I don't want to. The part I get scared about, honestly, Jake, is I don't want to lose Picasso and Hunter S. Thompson. You know, I don't want to lose Henry Miller. I don't want to lose
Harry Parch. Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Yeah, I don't want to. And then on the musical side, that applies as well, because they're products of their time. And you know, this whole thing of like now Turner Classic Movies is playing like a warning before they play like My Fair Lady because of content. And it's like, okay, I understand. You know, we have so far to go. I know that there were things that were totally fucked up back then, but you have to realize, like, we have to take the historical context of every piece of art, and we have to learn from the things that are wrong about these people and improve. But we have to also be able to say, Guernica is an important thing for my kids to see, to understand the horrors of war.
Absolutely.
There are things these people did that are, you know, maybe depending on your perspective, it might be unfortunately incredible, or it might be like, despite the fact that they did X, Y, Z in their lives, incredible. But you can't, you know, completely Monday morning quarterback all this work. And it's just, it's kind of like there's a line with all the stuff. And I mean, look, it's been a tough run for us, Jake. It's like at 44, look, my hero when I was a kid was Bill Cosby. You know,
it's just, you know, I just want to say before you go on, because you mentioned you're like, oh man, I love your Instagram feed. It's the sidemen, the ultimate. And I never watched the Cosby Show, but in my career after now 10 years, I got to Bill Cosby. I'll send you the interviews. I did 2 separate hour-long interviews, one about his involvement with music on the East Coast and one on the West Coast. I made it into his autobiography, and then the first op-ed came out, and the world, I used to wear that as a badge of honor. I can't do it anymore. So continue. I mean,
he basically saved jazz a couple times.
He did.
Over,
he absolutely did. Yeah.
The guy was a fucking monster.
Yeah, he was a total sociopath. Yeah, insane.
So we've all got to figure out like who we're going to draw the lines on and where, and it's complicated.
It's so complicated.
And it's difficult. You know, it really is complicated.
It
is. Difficult. I'll never watch his stuff again. I mean, there's certain people now. It's like same thing starting to happen with Woody Allen. You know, so I mean, look, it's art. I don't know how you parse this from one person to another, but in terms of your original question, which is, what do you tell a young artist now? I mean, with all that knowledge of like, we're trying to advance as a people, we need to advance as a people on all these levels. Respect. We need to advance respect. We need to get over or try to make amends for these continual civil rights violations and the continual entrapment of minorities and LGBTQ people. And it's a travesty. It should be our number one, along with saving the environment, should be our number one priorities in this country. But the thing is that how do you put that into song?
You know, do you feel like, I guess maybe the better question is, okay, like our kids, your kids, mine, some of your students, you know, we were blessed to be in this interesting zone of cats as Gen Xers that were pre-internet. I mean, there were computers, but there were no personal computers really. We did a lot of analog. We were pre-cell phone. I feel like we have the ability to tune out propaganda, also not be brainwashed so much. Do you think that younger cats, through no fault of their own, would they even understand this conversation that we're having? Like, they recognize do they recognize how much brainwashing is in our history? I try to talk to my older daughter about this. We have very spirited discussions. How much, I mean, that's what Gary Bartz told me. He's like, before they reopen the schools, I said, well, how do we start this process, like you said, of repairing all this insanity? And he's like, rewrite the history books before you open the schools, because the amount of brainwashing that's gone on for decades is insane. And that's what I guess maybe I'm asking is the essence of this, what we're trying to get at in this jam that we've been on for 50 minutes. Do you think younger cats get it, or are they too plugged in? Are they too much? Is it too much instantaneous information all the time? I mean, I'm a sports fanatic, and I used to, on Friday nights, I mean, if the Knicks, grew up in New York, if the Knicks were playing on the West Coast in Golden State, I may not find out about the final score till Sunday New York Times on a Friday night game. So, I mean, the fantasy in my head for over 24 hours, that did something to me. That doesn't happen now. We find out instantaneously. Do you think younger cats, would they even get what we're talking about?
Yeah, I think some of them do. I mean, I know some younger musicians who are extremely talented. Like, there's this group of guys from the Hudson Valley, my friend Connor Kennedy, who I met when he was in his teens, and now Connor's in Steely Dan now, which I joke with him sometimes because, you know, my former bandmates from the Greg Allman Band, like Mark Quinones and Art and Mark, play with the Doobie Brothers, and Connor plays with Steely Dan, and I play with Little Feat. So I've been joking that we're all signed to, you know, record labels in the 70s. Still.
Thank God.
But yeah, no matter what age, right? Because like, you know, Mark's like over 60, and you know, Connor's like 24, wow, you know, and I'm 44. Wow. So it's like 3 generations of musicians are still working for Mo Austin. It's ridiculous. but the thing is that like with Connor, you know, I'm really proud of his development, and he's somebody, and his band, these guys, Lee Falco, Brandon Morrison, and Will Bryant, they play, you know, drums, bass, and keys. They all sing really well.
Wow.
They all write really well. And they were actually put together first as Donald Fagen's solo band. And then when Walter died, that project got put on the shelf. I'm hoping that comes back for those guys at some point, because I saw them play at the Falcon, which is this tiny venue, and it was pretty magical.
Oh my, wait, the Fagen band you saw.
Yeah, it was Fagen with these four
young that's filthy, man. That's ridiculous.
It was great.
Oh.
And it's a great, but those guys give me a lot of hope, because they can hang with us, but here's the thing. Like, Connor started out by literally, you know, his mom was working at Levon's barn as a volunteer, and Connor literally was like taking the trash out for Levon, okay? So when he was 15, 16, kind of the way I was, he was exposed to like the Levon age group, which is, that's the Rosetta Stone. That's
You're right.
painting.
You're right.
That's painting in the fields, standing next to Van Gogh. That's what that is, you know?
Right.
So he was there. You know, he saw. He stood in the field. He watched him mix the paint. He watched where he went, what time of day, what kind of light was best. You know, he knew about the books he liked to read, and like the lifestyle. There's a thing to this, and you know, Connor and those guys, they get it because they were exposed early to that. And then there's guys like me. I call our age group, like guys in their 40s or 50s, the bridge generation, and we're the bridge from the guys who are now in their 70s back to the guys in their 20s.
Absolutely.
We're the bridge in between. Yeah. So a lot of what I do is I try to pass on the stuff I learned, you know, a decade on a bus with Greg Allman and his band. And when I joined the band, it was Jerry Jamont, Bruce Katz, Steve Potts, Floyd Miles. I mean, you know, every one of these guys is like a fucking legend at their own instrument.
Legend.
And I just lived with them on a bus for a few years, you know, and playing shows. Again, you know, going to get barbecue. What books do you read? What movies do you like? This all plays into it. Listening to Pharoah Sanders all night with Greg, smoking joints.
I love this. This is ridiculous.
It goes into every note you play.
Is it also about? This is so fascinating. I've been obsessed about. Part of it is also because a lot of the older cats. I mean, I remember Dave Holland telling me Train would go up to Miles and say, "What do you want me to play? What do you want me to play?" And Miles just kept turning his back on him. And then Train finally realized he just wanted him to be himself. That's why he hired him. But it wasn't. I mean, you were kind of used to this, but I feel like we live in everyone hangs on words now. We're such a litigious society now. Greg Allman, those cats, there was a lot of nonverbal communication on the bandstand. And I feel like with a lot of the younger generation, the bridge, as you call us, or you as a musician, isn't it a lot of like what you don't say? Like a lot of younger cats are clamoring for direction, verbal direction, positive feedback or whatever, but it's got to be done verbally. Did you learn about nonverbal communication from your elders?
I mean, it's pretty much the most important part of this whole thing. I'll give you an example. The first time I played with Little Feat, with Little Feat, it's like Jimi Hendrix is my favorite musician of all time.
Right.
But Lowell George, when I heard Little Feat when I was not even 10 years old, they were one of the reasons, and Lowell in particular was one of the people who, you know, I was reading Mad Magazine. I had a poster of Chuck Berry on my wall. And when I heard Lowell George and I saw a picture of him, I said, I can do this. Like, this is all going to make sense of this music. And that's how deep a touchstone Little Feat is for me, and especially Lowell. And when I got the call from Bill, which is a whole other story, to it was like subbing for a sub. Like Paul Barrere was ill, Larry Campbell was subbing, Larry couldn't make 2 gigs, and they called me. Okay, and it's a fun story, but it's for another time.
Sure.
I showed up at the sound check, first gig. I had met Bill and jammed with him with Greg Allman a couple times, very quick. I jammed with them with the Doobie Brothers a handful of times. Again, really, hey, man, that was fun. See you later. But everyone else, besides the horn guys, I didn't know from Little Feat. So I had never met Fred, Sam, Kenny.
Sure.
So basically, I'm warming up. I'm getting my sound on the stage, waiting for the band to show up. And I get a call, and it's my friend Jay who plays sax in the band. And he says, Scott, I'm on the bus with the band. We just found out Paul Barrere died. So like an hour goes by, and I'm sitting in front of my amp just going, this is all going to be canceled. And I only had about 2 or 3 weeks to relearn about 45 Little Feat songs, which could be called at random at any time, okay?
Right.
So it's not like I'm sitting there with a set list. And I've got to sing several of these songs on the list, singing lead, and then singing backup. But trust me, I had my shit so far together you wouldn't believe it. And I was ready. Those guys walked into that empty hall with me sitting there, and they had just lost their brother. I mean, they were all like emotional, and that's how I met them. And I looked them all in the eyes, and I said, I promise you guys that we're going to do something for Paul tonight, and I think these guys were kind of like, wow, I could tell they were looking at me. They're like, this cat's got a job on his
Dude, this is the most inspiration. I would have, I know I've met I've hung with, rest in peace, Paul. I mean, they intimidated me a little bit. And I know they were in a very distressed state of mind. I mean, talk is cheap at that point. So you were ready to rock. Tell me about the performance itself. I mean, did you knocked it out?
That's kind of what I was getting at.
Yeah, go ahead.
The unspoken thing, just
right.
To get you the emotional wind-up of where the unspoken instincts can get you is it came time to do the gig, and Bill Payne told me I'm going to tell the audience that Paul passed away. They don't even know, right? It hasn't been announced, and then we're going to play. So we come out. Bill makes this announcement about Paul, and you just hear the room audibly gasp, and it's like, here we go, and I've got to play and sing Paul's parts and Lowell's parts.
Wow.
And I tell you, man, it was one of the most magic nights of making music I've ever experienced. It was literally, like you said, this unspoken thing where I had this feeling the first time I played with the Greg Allman Band on stage. Although with Greg Allman, I did have like a week of rehearsals at his house first. With this, I had 45 minutes of rehearsal in total. But there was this immediate sort of like falling back onto a mattress feeling.
I love
it.
This.
Just was I had always been there.
Oh, this is great.
Because it's like going inside that record when you were 12 over and over again. You just go in the record. You just go inside it, and you just live inside it. And we got to the end of the gig, and the best moment for me is because, Bill Payne is, they're all like ridiculous musicians.
Absolutely.
Take them out of the best rock band of all time, and they're ridiculous musicians, played on tons of records. And Bill is definitely the leader of the band, especially in Paul's absence. And he came up to me, and we did a bow together, and he said to me, he goes, "Motherfucker, you do know our music.
Wow.
Welcome to the band." And that was it. It was like, that was how I got
that is one of the, that's so freaking great, man. I mean, what a beautiful, do you feel like, I love talking to the cats about this, and you don't need to, but I mean, that night to me sounds like, because you had internalized the music since you were young, that the most special thing occurred, on top of it being a heavy gravitational, emotional evening for obvious reasons. How did you learned over time to, allow, because it's obvious to me that, you went to a great arts school, you were able to play with a lot of the blues cats on the bandstand, then you played with all these iconic dudes that were, angling on rock music and swamp funk kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, the best Scott Sharrard moments is when you get out of your own way and you become a conduit for the music coming through you from the heavens. And that's what that sounds like that night. And I guess my question is how does that happen? Some people will say that happens every night. And some people will say, like Billy Cobham never did a drug.
Well, those people are lying.
Yeah, they absolutely are lying. No, they are absolutely lying. They don't get it. But I mean, there is something very tenable there because it doesn't matter whether you're on drugs or have never done a drug in your life. I mean, Billy Cobham told me, he's like, last set of an exhausting 3-week Mahavishnu run. Last set, he's exhausted because of fatigue. And he's playing drums, and he literally says that he could see himself on the side of the stage playing drums. But it's like the out-of-body experience, the falling back on a mattress, that ability to say, I don't really need to think about anything. I can just let information come through me, and it'll be like it'll just come out in the playing, and then that's the magic of music, I think. Was that one of those nights for you?
That particular night and that particular band, for me, it was I was just talking to Greg the whole day. Greg Allman and I we were as close as a band leader and musician can get, or a songwriter, rock star can get. I mean, I used to kid with him. I said, on a good day, we're maybe getting close to Sinatra and Quincy Jones if we're lucky. It was like it was that kind of relationship to his music, and we were very close, and as close as musicians can be in terms of the camaraderie of leading a band together and writing songs together and making decisions together, and me helping the team we had make decisions. And Greg was a complex personality to deal with, as you can imagine, but he didn't let a lot of people all the way in, and losing him was seismic. I knew it was going to come for years. I knew before most people that it was, but when that day came, I was never really ready for it. And ever since then, something happened to me. And when that friend of mine called me and said, Paul has died, I hung up the phone, and I was alone on the stage because all the tech guys, everybody had left because they all had just found out, and they were all like crying in the dressing rooms. And I was alone in this hall holding my guitar. And I remember just talking to Greg, like out loud, like, please, Greg, if there's any time for you to show up and fucking get me through something, any musical performance, this is it. And I just thought about him, and I thought about the Greg Allman Band, and I thought about his best friend, Chank, and I thought about how we handled losing Greg. And when those guys came in, I had that emotional toolkit to understand what it is to lose a musical brother, like a passenger on these musical journeys. And I tried to just what I tried to do was take the energy of that moment and the energy of the loss that my new friends were experiencing and my heroes with my loss. And I tried to marry that. It's the first time I've ever done anything like that in my life.
Wow.
In regards to playing music, where I consciously tried to harness all that energy. And I'm not a religious person. I just, music is moving energy. Okay, so what we do is it's a form of spiritual shamanism that uses energy, and energy is the most important thing in life, in all life. So what we do when we're at our best, that moment you're talking about of alchemy, where the audience and the band become one organism, is we're sort of like rearranging all the molecules so that there's it's like a giant, reactor, and sometimes it only happens on stage. Sometimes it only happens in the audience, and the band thinks it was a shitty gig.
Right.
And sometimes everybody gets it, right? And everybody gets it is what we all live for, and it's very rare. It doesn't happen all year long. It happens sometimes I live for the everybody gets it moment, and that night, certainly the energy was right in terms of, is this going to be a tragedy or a triumph to honor this man and honor this band that he created, you know? And it became a triumph, and thank God it did. But I think it's important to tap in to that energy in those moments, because for me, it's almost like, since I'm not religious, it's not like I can go, you know, please, Jesus Christ, lead me through the valley of the whatever. You know, it's like I just talked to Greg. I go, Greg, what, can you believe this shit? You know?
But, you know, I don't think, I mean, I remember there's a really unsung guitar player, Ted Dunbar, great jazz player.
I love Ted. I studied some of his chord books.
Right. No, you and him, I mean, I know you know who he is. And he said, he goes, church is on the bandstand, man. That's the real church. That's the spirit church. And I just wonder about, you know, I remember, you know, looking at the Grateful Dead, you know, the early 80s Grateful Dead live, I play that consistently for my girls in the car. It's manic, it's raging, it's off the cliff, they get back on. Here's the point, what you just said. The thing about the Grateful Dead was they sucked, their fans let them suck a lot. And they would wait for them to coalesce. Maybe it happens once a show, maybe the whole show was on fire, maybe the whole show was a disaster. But the point is, the thing about the Dead is they brought energy. They brought so much energy to the table. And that is you're absolutely right, that when the band is cooking the groove and the energy is the most important thing. And so like that to me, and I see a lot of people, because they do what I consider to be a formula trip kind of gig, that they are going through the motions because everything is so predictable. So I mean,
well, don't forget with the Dead too. Not to interrupt you, but
yeah, go ahead.
Song. I mean,
well, of course,
you got a hell of a song catalog. There.
I mean, the canon is insane. I take it for granted.
So, I mean, that's not gonna, you know, that's not gonna do you any disfavors if you miss some notes. The problem again, back to your point about young people, they spend all their time learning the band's best moments as improvisers, and they don't spend their time figuring out how the fuck am I going to write a song about what my story is.
Or just collectively, like, I agree, and then just like cohesively as a unit, bringing a sense of urgency and energy to the bandstand. Because, I mean, I remember Michael Shreve telling me, he's like, how do you expect the audience to go there if you don't go there first? I've sort of, you know, if I attend a Scott Sharrard gig, like Northern Aggression, my job is to get the band locked in to know that there's some crazy maniac in the audience who's demanding liberation. So I want to get fired up right away. I'm going to get people fired up. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the audience can come and set the tone as well. I just feel like sometimes what I'm seeing is it's the music is just, it's not that precious. And I think you might not even recognize it. You might be too far in the woods, but you have a family, you know, you've had these relationships, and like you said, it's about everything, not just always on the bandstand. And I feel like you recognize that there's more to life than just music, even though that is your gig. And by having a fuller life and a larger view, that enhances your music. And I just feel like younger cats today, the tunnel vision, the preciousness of it, and like you said, you made a very good point. It's like, if you're trying, I mean, your money goes up tenfold if you're going to play some recognizable Live from the Fillmore East, whatever it is, you know, when you're going to go up and you're going to get rewarded monetarily because it's the safe play. It's recognizable to people's ears. Where Lee Morgan and Miles, again, I mean, none of those guys weren't millionaires, but Miles did pretty well. Those guys were like, we dig what we're doing. And we hope you dig what we're doing, but even if you don't, we're still going to play it because we know it's badass. I mean, there's just some kind of fine line that I'm still looking for. Like, it's like that band that Danny Korchmar and Jim Keltner put together called Attitudes. There's an attitude, but that attitude comes from life experience. And I think our generation was able to, I feel grateful that we are the bridge, because I feel like we have to, that's the most, we certainly don't need to teach these kids, you don't need to teach these kids about chops or facility, but they need to learn about intestinal fortitude, loss, grievance, spirituality. It doesn't matter that you're not monotheistic religious. That's just, you're not into dogma. But you are a spiritual shaman. That's the stuff they need.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like, the whole thing of, the previous generation, the boomers or whatever it is, they didn't have an iPhone or the internet. So when a record came out, the record that they would wait for to show up at the record shop, when they got it, that record, whether it was, music from Big Pink or Electric Ladyland or Sgt. Pepper, that record told them how to dress, what to do, where to be.
Right. That's right.
It's like the record was the iPhone. And guess what? By 1976, the record was the fucking iPhone. It was the most profitable form of entertainment in the world, was record album sales. That doesn't count concert ticket revenue. The whole thing is turned upside down now.
Right, you're right. And then you said 76, is that right?
76 or 77.
Yeah, because by 79,
right in that pocket.
Yeah, and then there, let's be very clear. I remember interviewing Densmore. Elektra was a boutique label. I mean, you'll find the weirdest fusion rock stuff, random people get one-hit wonder stuff, but it was boutique. And the people at the higher ups were like, well, I don't know what these people are doing musically, but I don't care because we're making money. And then the bean counters got involved with articulating what they thought the music needed to be like. That would happen like 3 years after. It sucks. I mean, I know things move on and change, but the balance it's all been turned upside down. Scott, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I find it fitting that I queued this up before we got on the phone. So take a listen to this and the content, and we'll come back.
It was all feel, and it's funny. My grandfather, who was brought to the United States in 1903 by the impresario Walter Demarest to play in the New York Philharmonic, which actually back then was the symphony, to be the first flautist, Now, although he used to say a flautist is nothing more than an unemployed flutist. But he was like a schooled musician, He taught at Juilliard and all this stuff. So it was like, when I was born, and I heard all these stories about him because he was already passed, I went, well, wow, could he jam? And my dad said, not a lick.
Not a lick. Not a lick.
Not a lick.
Not a lick. Was your, no, I mean, I'm trying to figure out, like,
and stuff like that, but if he didn't have that paper in front of him, he couldn't do it. So when I started taking lessons, I was blessed with this great ear. And so I had every teacher I ever had stooged into thinking I was reading it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
But I could learn it by ear, play it, not absolutely perfect, but, what is. And I just kind of got by, and this was on the piano, and I said, by the time I got to be 12, I said, I need something I can take to my room and play, tired of sitting at the same place 5 days a week. So that's when I got the guitar.
You want to take a guess at who that is? We've brought him up in conversation and already today.
I don't recognize his voice. That is Martino, is it?
No, I just couldn't believe when you told me that. I mean, we've had a couple of epic climaxes on this interview, but that was my interview from 2014 with the late great Paul Barrere, and he was talking. I mean, Paul was like, Leroy Vinegar. Of course, I know you know who that is. His son grew up with Paul, and Leroy didn't want them going out and partying when they were in high school, so he bought them instruments, and they would jam to Chico Hamilton's Man of Two Worlds downstairs. They'd go to the It Club. But I mean, Paul, I love that cat so much, and that wasn't necessarily the audio clip I wanted to play, but I just found it amazing that you had that magical experience that night with Little Feat, and he passed that day, and you stepped up and really took it. And I can feel his presence here today. And I just wonder about, as you see, you know, you don't have a crystal ball. My gut feeling, Scott, is that, like you said, there's been an atom bomb taken to the woodshed, so to speak, or to the bandstand. Do you, outside of, when you say that there's animosity on the business side, can you extrapolate on if you think that there will be opportunities outside of just regional music? I mean, like, you know, like when do you believe that there will be a touring circuit again for creative musicians? Not talking about Steve Miller or Tower of Power or Journey or even Little Feat. I mean, those are name bands that can fill audiences, pay the, you know, maybe the insurance over. I don't know. Do you have any feeling about, like, just like Northern Aggression All-Stars? Like, I mean, you know, literally, like, or just creative bands. Like, what is the future of touring for those kinds of bands? It was hard enough to begin with. Where do you see that coming out? Because I still love the live experience, especially with people that are trying to do stuff that is, I don't want to say different or original, but they're just trying to be themselves. So you can riff on that any way you want.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can go to Florida and see a show right now.
Yeah, that's true.
Restrictions if you want.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, I mean, Billy Strings is doing a tour down there. I saw a video, and it's like, you know, it's as if the audience is acting as if COVID doesn't exist. I mean, I'm sure Billy is doing everything he has to do and doing it correctly. But, I mean, you know, look, I live in New York City. You know, I live in Harlem. My mother-in-law lives up in Woodstock, so we're up there frequently. We were up there for most of the worst of what happened last year in the spring. We all had COVID last spring. Everyone's fine. No problems. You know, we've all tried to figure out how to get through this thing. What's next is your question.
That's right.
I mean, February of last year, I had just verbally finalized a deal with a major booking agency, and I can tell you that agency no longer exists. How do you deal with something like that? I mean, that's the kind of level we're at. Like, I know major promoters who no longer work for corporate promotional agencies. They've all started their own games. So if there's all these fiefdoms and independent shops starting up, I think it's going to be very good for music in the long run. I think that this is going to help realign everything. My band, I just secured a new agent the other day who's out of Colorado, great guy, and very, very good. So we're going to start. My band, the Scott Sharrard Band, is going to start this summer. And I can tell you, if you're in the tri-state area of New York City, or if you're in Jersey or Connecticut, you're going to be able to see us once a month because we have residencies already lined up at places like the Falcon. There's Shanghai Jazz over in Madison, New Jersey. There's, we're working on the Levitt Pavilion and the FTC in Connecticut. There's the Colony in Woodstock. So you're going to get to hear my band all summer long if you're there. And then we're working on a week-long tour in Florida, a week-long tour in Texas, and a couple other places for farther into the summer because I want to at least get the pandemic to the point where everyone has access to the vaccine. And once I know everybody has access, I'm just letting it rip. I'm just going to start touring because I'll be fully vaccinated a week from today. And the guys in my band are all getting it. New York City has been really aggressive with this, thank God. We've done a great job here now. We had a lot of trouble in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like nobody knew what to do at the beginning, you know?
Yeah, it was a mess
Yeah.
for many reasons. I mean, it starts at the top and then it just goes from there. And we.
It was also just like festering in my, it was already
totally,
like, it
was,
I don't think there was like any real way to. Let me ask you. This is interesting. So, but you're looking at least, and I dig your philosophy. Wait for everybody to have the opportunity to get vaccinated. There's nothing on your conscience. You can let it rip. But you still feel like to get that live experience, the Sun Belt, Texas, Louisiana, those places are going to be more conducive to your band to do a tour, at least in the short term.
I mean, we'll see what happens. We're looking at Colorado too. I mean, there's different markets where they don't have the restrictions, and if, like I said, if by, Joe Biden has been kicking ass, and if they keep kicking ass on the federal level with the vaccine rollout, at least, I mean, it's the only shot we have, man. I mean,
I dig, man.
I mean, the last bunch of clowns, they fucked up all their opportunities to make the mask thing work, to make the contact tracing work. So
you're right.
Without proper masking and contact tracing, and the only way we're going to get a handle on this thing is the vaccine. So my thing is like, my man has already like blown past his goal with 100 million doses. So I'm looking for my band. I'm looking at like June or July to start reaching outside of the tri-state area. We have a gig on the books in Macon, Georgia in October that's supposed to go forward. So we're kind of building something around that. As far as Little Feat goes, and really, as far as really pretty much anybody goes, to be honest with you, who has to get on a bus,
right,
and take a crew and route 3 weeks of shows,
right?
I don't know, man.
Dude,
maybe definitely not this summer. I'll tell you that. I don't know about I don't know about the fall or the winter. I mean, we have to see how things go. We have to see if people do the right thing, and by do the right thing, I mean, distance and mask until you get all your shots. And then once you get all your shots, continue to respect,
just wear the wear the mask and go dance, dude.
Well, it's all about continue to respect the numbers too. Like I have an app on my phone in New York City.
Right.
And what we do is, as long as that number is around a certain amount, it's just irresponsible to not do all these things.
You're talking about a death? What are you talking about? Death count, or what do you mean?
No, we have a weekly average. You can look up on your phone. You can see the daily average, weekly average of positive tests. And trust me, most people are not getting tested, so it's probably way more widespread than it is on there.
Absolutely.
But these are the kind of things I have to think about as a musician now, because my job is to gather people closely together so that they can sing and scream and dance around. And get drunk. And
get drunk. Yeah.
Take their masks off.
You know what it is, man. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm coming to the Falcon. I'm coming to the Falcon to see. I'm coming to the Falcon to see your gig, dude. You let me know the date.
Well, you're gonna have six chances, because we're doing 6 gigs there in 6 months.
Okay, so basically, it'll be a once a month residency there.
Yeah, that's one of the.
We got to get to CG Munoz on the bandstand with you for one of those. That would be insane.
I'm always down for a good jam, man. That's
I got to tell you, you blew me away, man. Like you were able, even through this haze, and I realize you've been productive and teaching online and you have a family and everything, but I haven't really talked to anybody. I've done several hundred interviews since the pandemic began, but nobody that has been able to articulate. There's no prophecy here, but you really broke it down to the rudiments and the fundamentals of what is still unknown, what is trying to be done, and why don't we just do part 2 maybe next month? I mean, we got a lot more to get to. We barely got to anything today.
Yeah, there's a lot to address when it comes to what's next.
You know what it is? You. It seems to me like just because of the amount of time you spent with the Graybeards, Pharaoh, roasting joints with Greg. By the way, I have so many classes. Buzzy Featon told the greatest story about going down there for the laid back session. I'm not sure if Greg ever told you that story, but we just have a lot more to get to, man. And I can tell you that, I think at the end of the day, what it comes down to is, especially with my kids, love is very important, but respect is equally, if not greater. And I can just tell you that the respect amongst peers, not professional musicians, but people that do play music, that they dig you, man. And there's a lot of respect for you all over the place. So just continue to follow that inner compass, and I guarantee you that one of the cool things about this whole time, if you can look at it that way, is that there kind of is no rule book. There's, the book's gone. So it's kind of like, I mean, you can make up your own rules, and as long as your conscience is okay with it, that's the way it's going to be, man. Because there is the old script is unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, is gone.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting moment. I mean, where I really want to go with my career is I want to move into like doing more, documentary television work about music, American roots music. I want to get away from like chasing the illusion that making records does anything, because it doesn't anymore. It just promotes a live show. So
that's right.
And unless I'm playing with Little Feat, I don't want to be, certainly with my own band, living on that treadmill, because I think it's too much work. I'm 44, and that's not old by any means, but I'm thinking about 10 years from now, I want to be making money while I sleep. I don't want to be, out there fucking, sleeping in a Motel 6 on Tuesday night, waiting for the weekend to make a real budget, with touring in a van. That's just not my.
Well, you're going to get there. I mean, it's you are going to do it. I mean, dude, I can feel it in like, to my core. Like, it's not even about like how motivated you are. It's just like, there's going to be some dark alleys. You might have to go back to the hamster wheel for a minute, but
we're getting on the wheel.
Getting on the wheel, man.
I'm finding different ways to do it, though. Tom Waits would say, "Get behind the mule."
Get behind. I mean, yeah. You know what? And like, continue to access the spirits that have come before you and left, and communicate with them, and they will give you cosmic intelligence and guidance to find your groove again. But you definitely, like, as a seasoned cat in the prior music industry business, it is cool. It's important, actually. That's the wrong word. It's important to talk to cats like you, because this is like a new world. And, I mean, I'm also sort of just getting myself to the fact that, the way I want to experience the show, up in front of the bandstand, in front of the PA, so I can get the natural vibration of all the bandmates and get the Sharrard sweat in my face, like that. I don't know when that's going to exactly come back, so I have to taper my expectations. Maybe it'll come back right away, but man, I never thought live music, live communal spiritual music, would ever become a wedge issue in our country. But the amount of people there's been a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder for everybody. And it starts the day you walk into a venue with a bunch of random people, and somebody just decides not to wear a mask, and that's going to irritate somebody. Is that going to throw everything off? I mean, it's really, it's fascinating and actually humbling when I look back a year ago to where we were just, amidst the masses at the Brooklyn Bowl or Lunatico or Barcourt.
Well, we had other problems then. Donald Trump could have.
He could have nuked the entire world. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, you got to kind of take the hand you're dealt. I mean, I remember turning to my wife when this happened. Like, we were about 2 weeks into the lockdown here, last March or April or whatever it was, and I was just like, "We've done this before, right?" And she's like, "Absolutely." It's like, when you're a musician, my wife and I have been together over 20 years. When you're a musician, you're used to having the rug pulled out from under you over and over again. Wow. So I have the resources where I just went to social media and I went to my old contact list of people that I've taught lessons over the years on Zoom and Skype, which I had already been doing for on and off for a few years before the shutdown. And I just put a roster together, and boom, I just switched over to that, because this is the thing, man, is like the way you stay in music now. And I'll tell you something. Ahmet Ertegun told me this when I was like 21 or 22. He wanted to get me signed to Atlantic. He couldn't. Jason Flom passed on me, which is fine. He's a great guy. He does a lot of great things for charity. I'm not really a fan of any of the bands he signed, but he's a great person. and a very smart businessman. But Jason passed on me, and Ahmet was, at the time a chairman, and he was a little disappointed. He tried to get Tommy LaPuma to produce me. He was talking to me about doing like a blues jazz record. This is before.
Oh, that would have been so perfect with LaPuma, man. It would have been ridiculous.
Well, it would have been. I would have gone in a different direction. I would have been wearing a suit and playing an arch top and singing. Because they really wanted to put me in that kind of singing standards. Like this is when Peter Cincotti had come out, and I Still Have the Same Lawyer with Peter, and there was Bublé was about to come out. And
right.
It was one of those things where I was playing like this kind of like hardcore blues soul stuff on my gigs, and they were like, well, maybe we can push it. But Matt said some really important, as you can imagine, things to me, and one of them was, he said, look, these guys who are running the corporate record industry right now are going to run it into the ground because they're not embracing art, they don't care about art, and they also don't understand technology, and it's going to be the end of the business. So you, Scott Sharrard, need to get all your shit together. You need to write, you need to arrange, you need to play, you need to teach, and you need to do it better than everybody else. And you need to start now.
It's amazing that it's
really
amazing.
Lucky.
That's amazing that coming from the paradigm that he was in, that he was able to see that is incredible.
He nailed it. And you know what? Again, like I said to you earlier in the conversation, I listened. Right. I didn't say, all right, old man, we'll see what's next. I said, this is Ahmet fucking Ertegun. This guy is like a real tastemaker. So I'm going to do what he tells me to do because I know that's what my heroes would listen to and what they would respect. And I can't help but try to follow that guidance. And I did. And look, in music, in my opinion, there's two viewpoints I try to take no matter what happens, because I constantly get shaken, whether it's COVID or Greg dying or my last solo album being a total disaster, whatever it is. What I always think of is, number one is like, if you take care of the music, it will take care of you.
Todd Barkin said that. Yeah, that's the Keystone Corner cat. Take care of the music.
And all the guys in New York have said that for years. That's where I first heard it, was here. I think my friend Diego Vogelino was the first guy to say it.
He's right, yeah.
And that was many years ago when I first started playing with him. So that's like a mantra I've kept going through, especially through the last 10 years. Like, I've had a lot of different changes in my life, having kids and being in the music industry and all that, like trying to stay on point with that. And the humility approach to the job is really important, and just staying focused on the music. And then I gotta tell you, man, I've had the most ridiculous amount of luck meet my insane amount of preparation over and over again. So
yeah, I mean, Branch Rickey said luck is the residue of design. So there you go.
That's a great quote.
That's the truth, man.
100% correct.
Yeah. That's it.
But I'm around, over 20 years, just like I met Charlie right when I met my wife, and here I am with Charlie Martinez, producer and engineer who's worked on all my solo records. We're working on my 6th solo album now, which is undoubtedly my best collection of original songs I have ever assembled, and I cannot wait to share this with you because
we're gonna blow it, dude. Let's
This one is off.
Yeah.
This one is completely off the charts. So. But Charlie and I have worked together through all this. He's gone and he's worked with, he started when he was young with the Stones and Steely Dan, and now he's still working with Donald Fagen and I did all this great time with Greg and now with Little Feat we've come together, and Charlie's working on we're working on new tracks for Little Feat right now, and Charlie's involved in that now. So it's kind of. It all kind of comes together. You see how that works? It's like it's a long game. I have a long game philosophy in music, and that makes me very unpopular with some people, and it makes me very popular with the people that I want to be around.
And you know what?
That's basically where I'm at.
Yeah, and my 4th book is coming out. I got to send you my first 3 because you will love them. But the 4th book, Marty Ballin from the Jefferson Airplane, he rest in peace. He said, dude, you're going to have some people that get it, and there's going to be a whole bunch of people that don't get it and think you're crazy, and you just ignore it. and you just keep doing your thing. And like you said, you hang. You don't want to get in an echo chamber, but you get with the people that will tell you the truth all the time and that you enjoy hanging out with. Because most people will tell you you're crazy. But when that happens, you just keep going down that path. And that's what I've been doing for 10 years. And let's plan for set 2, man. We're just getting going here, man. I can't wait to hang again.
I love it, man. Well, thanks for taking the time and having me, Jake. You live up to your Instagram post.
I did to see now you know what it's about, because I just want to be clear. All the content that you repost, and thank you for doing it because it helps me grow and get my tentacles out there. It's all from what we just did. It's all from these interviews.
I could tell. I knew this was going to be fun. That was why.
You rocked, man. I mean, it's easy. It's I'm only as good as my guest, so you rocked out, man.
It was a lot of fun, Jake. Well, yeah, keep me posted, man. We can always do some more. I mean, it'd be fun to do something again, maybe either midsummer or in the fall, because I'm gonna leak this album out 2 songs at a time.
Oh yeah, no, dude. Whenever you want to promote whatever, we got set 2 in the works, but yeah, it was really great, and I'll have this up later tonight as in my podcast.
Great, and yeah, tag me on it stuff.
Of course.
Amplify it.
And pretty soon I'll be transcribing it and putting it up on Instagram, dude, because there were some great stories, man.
Yeah, it was fun.
All right,
thanks for having me, man.
Be cool, be safe, man, and stay in touch. Much love to you.
More to come, buddy.
All right, dude.
Thank you.
Later, bro.
Take care.
Peace. Bye. Well, not always does every interview live up to its billing, but with Scott Sharrard, is never a disappointment. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. Thanks to Stella and Charlie for hanging out, and we'll see you later.
To support local restaurants, we've been to every city, including Little Rock.
And even
Worcester.
And tonight, I'll be eating the
chicken quesadilla
from
Tony's Tex-Mex
in
Katie.
Do you think they bought it?
Oh, yeah.